The most frightening thing about this house, and others like it, is that they can go unsold for 6 months, 8 months, even a year, haunting their owners with a financial nightmare. That's why ERA Real Estate developed the Seller's Security Plan. And if you qualify, we'll assure you that if we don't sell your home, we'll buy it. The Seller's Security Plan. Another reason we're selling houses.
WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
PM Magazine will not be seen tonight, so that we might bring you the following special broadcast. PM Magazine will return.
Oh dear, the movers are here. As you can see, the movers are here, and they're making their final moves. And we have just made our last news broadcast from this nice old building. Tomorrow, we begin broadcasting from our lavish new studios, communication center up on the Nicollet Mall, just a couple of blocks away on 11th Street, across from Orchestra Hall. Been a long time in this building, 33 years for me. Variety shows, talk shows, religious shows, kid shows, quiz shows, sportscast, and lots of news has been reported from this hallowed Studio 4. From here, we have turned the cameras on many, many celebrated people. But tonight, risking modesty, we are turning the cameras on ourselves to tell you about the people who've worked here at WCCO Television and 3 decades of broadcasting in the Twin Cities. It's our story, and we'd like to tell it. I think you'd get a kick out of it, so stick around. We'll be back in just a moment.
I thought it would taste good, but not this good.
Diet Coke, yeah, Diet Coke. Look on the taste from Coca-Cola.
I don't care if it's diet or undiet. It tastes great.
Diet Coke, taste Diet Coke. Just for the taste of it, just for the taste of it. Diet Coke.
Now there's both, Diet Coke and new caffeine-free Diet Coke.
Top room, where we stored scenery, furniture, props, and all sorts of other materials used in the production of television programs. So, warehouse of memories for me. Back over there in the corner, there was a loft about 6 feet off the ground with a little ladder going up to it, and it was piled high with furniture. Every once in a while, I'd sneak up there and catch a little cat nap, about 20 minutes. Till one day, one of our clumsier technicians fell off the ladder, broke his collarbone. They took the ladder out, and I hadn't had a good 20-minute nap in this building since. Looking around here gives you a pretty good idea of how things begin. For WCCO Television, it began with this, the radio. In 1946, there were about 60 million radios in America. And every night, people packed the parlor just to sit and listen to the radio.
From Jack Armstrong and the makers of Wheaties.
Although radio was in its golden age, experiments in picture broadcasting were well underway. And in fact, several commercial television stations were already on the air. For the most part, radio broadcasters realized the obvious advantage of picture broadcasting, and many had taken out insurance against the future by gaining a foothold in this new process called television. And so was the case in the Twin Cities. WTCN Radio decided to also be WTCN Television. In 1946, they received a license and set out to build an antenna on the Fauché Tower, at that time the tallest building from here to Seattle. On July 1st, 1949, WTCN Television hung its broadcasting banner across what was then called the Radio City Theater building on 9th Street in Minneapolis. The broadcast day was 5.5 hours long. Sign on at 3 p.m., sign off at 9 p.m. with a half hour off for dinner. There was a staff of 26, many of them from WTCN Radio. 1 studio, 1 camera for showing films, and 3 for local programs. Those early days were mostly live programs with a heavy schedule of sports remotes, namely Minneapolis Millers and St. Paul Saints baseball, and wrestling. Our first announcer was Lute Mason, and the first newscaster was John Ford, and tucked away in the back announce booth was a face and a voice soon to be familiar to all.
In the early days of television, I think we had more fun, and I think maybe the viewers had more fun, too, in that we had a number of called live programs. And one of the programs in the afternoon, a talk show, was done by Arlie Haberly, a half-hour program every afternoon that was a little bit different every day.
Could you be back, please, tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock? We're going to have some girls come over from the university to select their favorite bachelor. It's an awfully good idea that Glamour magazine had. See you tomorrow at 4. Bye now.
Let's have fun together, happy we will be. I'll play and sing for you. Now pull up a chair, you can play games and sing too. Hi, gang! Oh, say!
Toby Prynne played the piano. Was known around the cities as a marvelous entertainer, a wonderful sense of humor. Has a nice round face and a great big smile.
I'll be back tomorrow night. We'll play more games, we'll have more kids, and we'll have more fun. See you then, huh? Okay.
While Arlie and Toby were entertaining their way to stardom, I was a struggling young announcer, just dying to get into this thing called television. And I did. I literally walked in off the street one day. An hour later, I was on the air. And the next day, I'll never forget my first assignment in the television booth. Arlie was on the air in Studio One with her Around the Town program. I was the nervous announcer. I was cued, and I read the opening announce. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Arlie Haberly's Around the Town. Arlie intros first guest and cues commercial. I read it that way. Well, I kept the job. They didn't fire me. They had no one else. Kraling was downstairs eating lunch. In 1950, WTCN-TV hooked up to a special telephone cable, the coaxial cable that brought network shows to town. Jack Benny on violin, George Burns, Gracie Ellen, all live as it happened.
Say, kids, what time is it?
When you love ukulele style, with every note your heart will float.
The X4 Ranch with Bob Franzen entertained the kids. Raleigh Johnson went hunting and fishing.
We were on the air with it for 9 years, always sponsored, all the time. And I did a lot of the filming on the show myself, and I enjoyed it. Sweetie Pie was a very pretty, a very beautiful girl. And we needed a name, and I just happened to pick Sweetie Pie out of the air, and she actually became rather famous.
Here's an example of some of the things we were doing in 1951, Life magazine, February 12th for that year. There's an article here entitled School by TV. In Minneapolis last week, where the city schools closed by a strike of janitors and teachers, 63,000 elementary and high school students were on forced vacation. For 2 hours every morning, station WTC.
Karen Way.
We like his nose for news and his latest views of the day.
We like this fella who always feels like he's right door.
We like more.
One more time, a tribute to Dave Moore, Friday at 9 on Channel 4.
Returned to WTCN Radio, and Chick McEwen came up from Iowa to become our principal newscaster. In late 1952, as Chick presented the news, viewers were greeted by this announcement.
Yes, we on WCCO Radio are very proud to welcome the new WCCO, Channel 4, WCCO TV.
They're all going to be a part of the CBS network. Really? Yes. Isn't that ducky? Yes.
The new call letters brought also several other things. An increase in the power of WCCO TV signal. It could now be seen by more people.
We done it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. On the air.
And the new owners brought Cedric Adams from WCCO Radio.
Good evening. There's a happy household in rural Ramsey County tonight.
Cedric was Mr. Northwest in WCCO Radio. His 10 p.m. radio newscast was heard all over the nation.
Cedric, rather than being a mentor of mine, was almost a father of mine. My father died when I was very young. There wasn't a more generous man alive than Cedric Adams. He was As far as my memories are concerned, he was a giant of a human being.
1953 brought the world of aviation, a unique program that combined news about airplanes and travel. Its host was Sherm Bowen, who also was the pilot of the WCCO TV News plane.
The program started out rather slowly, as you can imagine, but we learned in a hurry. I went out and found a $75 camera, and of course I flew my own plane all over the country shooting film, and it stayed on the air for 28 years, so I'd say that it was a fair beginning and a fair ending.
Another popular personality of the early 50s was Cleland Card, a master with an endless bill of characters. In 1954, Axel, who was Cleland's most well-known character, began an 11-year run.
Cock the shining eye and says, who's going to fix the faucet? Drip. Oh, well, I'll see you, kids. So long.
Also in 1954, a bit of history with the first live television coverage of a total eclipse of the sun. WCCO television coverage was sent to stations all over the country. By 1955, news was beginning to expand, and local programming was at its peak. The weekly schedule was full.
The country party, people. We certainly did here. And say, Mary, it looks like...
The whole feeling of television in those days was a family feeling, and the most rehearsal I think any of us ever had in doing the children's shows was to put on our costumes and walk in the studio, and suddenly we would be transposed into those characters. I really had an alter ego with Carmen.
In the newsroom, another familiar face had been hired. Well, almost hired.
There was a brief, lovely moment when I was tempted with an offer to come work in CCO. Unfortunately, just at that same moment, I got nominated to do the conventions for the first time at CBS television.
In 1957, the Russians blasted Sputnik 1 into orbit, and the Ford Motor Company launched the Edsel. I became news anchorman, hoping history would be kinder to me than it would be to the Edsel. And we announced a bold new concept in news broadcasting.
President Eisenhower today named inflation as this country's major domestic problem. He said consumers can help combat it by avoiding reckless buying.
The humidity is not quite so bad tonight, and so this push is a whole lot easier. The forecast for tomorrow: fair skies and little change in temperature, actually. After a low tonight of 55, a high tomorrow of 70.
And here's a reminder to you coaches throughout the state to call your scores to our Sports Desk Collect. Just call us here at Federal 80552 with your score, and we'll get it on the air. Well, it won't be too long until another football will be rolling.
March of 1959 was Cedric Adams' last newscast. WCCO TV Reports was born. We received our first 2-inch videotape machine. And now programs could be recorded and played back instantly. Television was changing. The emphasis on local programming had shifted from entertainment to information. And WCCO TV News was clearly the emphasis. The 50s were over, a fabulous decade that fostered television, born, bred, and maturing. It was an age of invention and innovation, and just as radio had done 10 years earlier, television was packing them into the parlor. I'm going to coax a few more memories here, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Ha-ha, now straighten up and fly right.
Take your average, everyday office.
Morning.
Add just 1 cup and...
Ooh, where'd he get that suit?
Kuppenheimer, where it doesn't cost a lot to fill your cup, because we make them in our own factory. Take a rather dull party. Add just 1 cup.
Happy birthday.
And
Ooh, where'd you get that suit?
Koppenheimer, where you get that suit. Sport coat and slacks for less.
"1960 began a decade of social and political upheaval. Television brought the battlefield right into our living rooms. There's triumph in space and tragedy at home. Here, we saw a little of it all. Our news and public affairs programming grew, and it was clear that people were looking more and more to television news for information.
She is young, still dependent upon her parents for support, and she is unmarried.
1961 brought recognition when the George Foster Peabody Award was presented to WCCO TV Reports for outstanding achievement in public service programming. And Major League Baseball came to the Twin Cities. The Washington Senators moved west to become the Minnesota Twins. The National Football League welcomed the Minnesota Vikings to pro football. And at the Minnesota State Fair, the people of WCCO made a lasting impression. '62 saw the first international satellite broadcast when we gave the world a view of the stone faces on Mount Rushmore and the music of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I was anchoring a Saturday late-night newscast, which, as time wore on, turned out to be quite something else.
Now the bedtime news.
And 22-year-old Mary Hardwick of Niagara, New York, will recall February 1st, 1969, as the day she married Edward Larraberry, and thus became Mary Larraberry.
Oh, truly, you're a bed with class, on which to rest by wearing...
Thank you very much, Bruce Quatrain.
I wasn't done yet.
You were done. You're done for good. So for the rest of the scores, let's go to the old scoreboard. Yeah, there's the old scoreboard.
John Gallus went on the air with a Sunday morning religious program, which became one of the longest-running locally produced television programs in the industry. It's still on the air today. It was November 1963 when tragedy struck. President Kennedy was dead, assassinated. For 3.5 days, there were no television programs, no commercials, as television led the nation in mourning. The country was shocked. Our collective consciences seeked reassurance, and somehow watching the events seemed to have brought all of us closer together. 1964 was a year of technical advancement, and there was still a heavy schedule of local programming.
Believe it or not, all those children's programs ran about 20 years here on Channel 4's. Some of the best times, the most fun I ever had. From the Commodore Cappy character, we went on to a character known as Clancy the Keystone Cop. But you know, everything was live in those days, so we had only one shot at it, and that made it interesting. I have a feeling that because Al Lotsberg and I had fun, the children watching the show had fun.
By 1965, the war in Vietnam had escalated. And in our newsroom, reporter Phil Jones and photographer Les Solon went to Vietnam to visit Minnesota service personnel.
It started a trend, because as you look back, there are many CCO reporters and camera people who have traveled to other places around the world since then. Also, they launched WCCO on beyond the boundaries, beyond the states in its immediate coverage area.
Metropolitan Stadium hosted the All-Star Game. Our Twins faced the Dodgers in the World Series. We lost, but it took 7 games. 1967 was a year of contrasts. In July, civil violence broke out in Minneapolis. And in a special report, Rumor to Rubble, we examined the tensions in our city. A short distance away, in the downtown Minneapolis area, the Nicollet Mall was finally completed and opened with a special live broadcast. And the rock group, The Who, predicted the violence that was to follow in this, the most explosive year of the decade. And it was the debut of The Scene Tonight.
From WCCO Television News, the Northwest Communications Center, this is The Scene Tonight, in color with Dave Moore, Bud Kraling, Hal Scott, and Skip Loescher with Action News.
Good evening, everyone.
We rehearsed that show and planned that show and talked about that show for over a year. None of us had any idea, I don't think, whether it would work or not. It did. It was probably one of the most exciting times I've ever spent. I mean, it was a fun group to work with. Watching Dave was like watching the premier old pro of the business. I probably learned more about being on the air from Dave Moore than anybody else I've ever met. Kraling was terrific. George Rice was good. Hal Scott was there. It was a nice group. We liked each other. We respected each other professionally. We got along on and off the air, and I think it showed.
1969. It was the second trip to Vietnam when Al Austin and Gordon Bartouche presented Brunt's Little War, an award-winning documentary on Vietnam. The midday program, a noon news and talk variety show, debuted with Bill Carlson and Shirley Hutton, later to be co-hosted by Cindy Osborne.
We'll be speaking to young Christy McNichol, who doesn't like to be called young anymore. Not old Christy McNichol either.
More on Tuesday became one of the few weekly prime-time public affairs programs in commercial television. And in the same year, Mary Tyler Moore tossed her hat in the air and ate lunch at the Crystal Court. The 60s was one of the most turbulent times in our history. Television searched for its proper place in society. The public appetite for news and information was growing. And technology was again changing. The next decade would bring miniature video cameras, small portable videotape recorders. And the marriage of television to technology, which seemed matured, was entering a whole new era. We'll be back right after this.
Ready for a shock? I found out all fabric bleach works best in hot water. I also found Borateam, the borax bleacher. It's specially formulated for warm water washing. So when I switched to warm for brightening colors, I switched to Borateam, the borax bleacher.
When I switched to warm to remove stains from synthetics, I switched to Borateam, the borax bleacher. Borateam, it's made to whiten, brighten, and remove stains in warm water. So when you switch to warm, switch to Borateam, the borax bleacher.
After nearly 10 years, 1971 marked the end of the bedtime news and the beginning of Outdoors and You with Chuck Ross. Sue Cox joined the sports department as Bronco and soon established a rather remarkable record of gridiron prognostications. Don Cladstrip and Les Solon circled the globe for a special broadcast on the tensions in the Middle East. And on CBS, it was a new era of programming. Archie Bunker was every man, all rolled up in a somewhat acceptable, pudgy package of bigotry. Social issues were now entertainment. 1972 saw the worst student unrest at the University of Minnesota ever, and Washington Avenue became a battleground. And on a Hollywood backlot battlefield, CBS aired a series that no one really thought would make it. The series was MASH. In 1974, we celebrated our silver anniversary, and I played a rather bristled little character on our own Christmas drama, Miracle on 9th Street.
Santa has to know all of the names, or else he won't get the gifts down the right chimneys.
In 1975, once again, our newsroom received the George Peabody Award for a program called From Belfast with Love, produced and reported by Al Austin. New ownership took over in 1976. MTC Properties purchased 100% of WCCO Television and brought in a new management team. Jerry Bowen, now with CBS, traveled to Guatemala for a special program. Susan Spencer, also with CBS, joined the newsroom reporting staff.
Everybody probably likes to think that the time that he was at CCO was the best. But I like to think that the time that I was there really was the best. And I know that the people that are still good friends of mine who've gone on and are now so many of them at CBS, Jerry Bowen, Bob McNamara, Don Cladstrup, Barry Peterson. And people at CBS really have a incredible respect for WCCO. They joke about it and they call it the farm team. And you know, you get fairly proud of that.
Over the years, there had been an increase in the number of special reports, and we think the 1970s offered some of the best.
But the facts remain. Pinkerton hired Gene Robinson, an ex-felon, and put him to work with a gun.
Have you committed arson?
Yes, I have.
How much?
More than I'd care to admit.
George says he was offered the...
A bowling alley has called. A man who was tossed out is back, waving a rifle, threatening to shoot up the place.
This is the 10
In
p.m.
1977, Doug Moore joined me at the anchor desk of the new 10 p.m. report, along with meteorologist Mike Fairborn. It was a new format, a co-anchor team working together to present the news. Late on the evening of January 13th, 1978, Hubert H. Humphrey passed away. 3 days later, thousands paid their last respects as WCCO Television News presented a 5-hour broadcast tribute to the distinguished senator from Minnesota. 1978 brought in Pat Miles and Don Shelby as co-anchors for the weekend newscasts, and the Public Affairs Department launched the Moore Report with a 3.5-hour primetime special called Nobody Ever Asked Me. From that time on, the Moore Report has continued to present an award-winning series of documentaries.
Good evening.
1979 brought on what has turned out to be a very successful 5 p.m. report, a more relaxed news format designed to immediately debrief reporters just prior to the 6 p.m. report. It was also the year of the Live Eye in the Sky, a news bureau in downtown St. Paul, and PM Magazine, a daily information and entertainment program. And 1979 marked our 30th anniversary in broadcasting. The national political conventions took place in 1980, and we offered live satellite coverage of our local delegations. A newspaper strike gave birth to the Morning Report. Incredible Kids, a locally produced magazine show for Minnesota young people, joined the Saturday morning lineup. On a dark, rainy night, the Live Eye in the Sky made a dramatic rescue of 2 young people off an island in a flood-swollen river. 1980 also saw the birth of the I-Team with its first investigation, this one of Minneapolis housing inspectors, for which the team received a National Emmy Award. In 1981, our noon show, Midday, became the Noon Report with Bill Carlson and Debbie Ely, a full half-hour newscast at 12 noon. In December of that year, we presented a locally produced drama, O. Henry's Gift to the Magi. WCCO Radio's news director, Kurt Beckman, and I had an exclusive interview with President Reagan on his 1982 visit to the Twin Cities. And in October of 1982, we opened our Washington, D.C. News Bureau and premiered the new 10 p.m. report, a tri-anchor newscast with live reports via satellite from Washington, D.C. every evening. 1983, another National Emmy Award to the I-Team for its investigation of the sexual abuse of children. And our sports department covered the 1983 Minnesota High School Hockey Tournament and accompanied the Vikings to London in the first NFL game ever in Europe.
They're playing more like the Super Bowl Cup as it's taken the Global Cup here in the early going.
In mid-83, we put the finishing touches on our new communication center, which in turn has led to our last newscast in this old building and the very purpose of this broadcast. If we've taken anything from these past 3 decades, it will be that people make memories, not buildings or sets or props. And that a building really is just a place where people go to care about something, a place to be when things happen. Tomorrow we'll be in a new place, a place where now silence is the only occupant. It's our job to take along the family luggage, cherish the old memories, and create some new ones. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Dave Moore. Good night.
In my Easter bonnet, with all the frills upon it, I'll be the grandest lady in the Easter parade.
Hey, Captain Kidd, what are you doing with that bucket of dirty water?
Now, start a 7-day test free that may change your life. Listen.
Get high-potency ribitol absolutely free in this offer.
I'd like to... How are you, Hall, you old bum?
I'd like to drink their strawberry... Well, thank you very... Well, you didn't have to send two, but thank you. That's very nice. Thank you, Magic Cable. You're a very nice Magic Cable.
An old-fashioned Christmas with snowballing fun.
WCCO TV, Minneapolis, St. Paul.